one.
Friday night edition of the Anaheim Calling podcast. Happy Friday to all of you fine folks who are listening. If you are listening tonight live for our Twitch stream, or if you're listening tomorrow, Saturday, then happy weekend to you. The Ducks, happy times continue with a 2-1 victory over the Columbus Blue Jackets, extending their win-loss record now to 4-1 on the season. A really close contest, probably not the prettiest game that they'll play or that they have played, but a win nonetheless. And I think that there are certainly positives to be extracted from it. As always, things to work on. Jake, it's Friday. You're probably feeling good, and you're probably feeling good about this Duck season so far.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know if there's any way. I guess the only way I could be happier is if maybe earlier on in this game they would have played a little bit better, maybe if in some of the first periods, but if you were to tell me going into the season that the Ducks would be 4-1-0 and they would be playing a style of game that was vastly different than the way they played in previous years, playing more of a transition style, more kind of the wealth being spread up and down the lineup in terms of minutes, in terms of chances, in terms of goals, I really can't ask for a whole lot more because, yes, people may point to the fact that the Ducks were 5-0 last year, and I was not too happy about that at the time. This is a whole different story.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, this is a whole different story, though. The way that they're winning these games, yes, they are tight games, but I don't know if I'd consider any of these. Maybe tonight might be the closest you'd get to that as being quote-unquote ugly wins.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think that if you're going to talk about ugly wins, this is probably the closest to that. I think that this game, what's interesting about this game, and not to immediately rewind to last night's podcast about the game against Pittsburgh, but this game was a lot like the Pittsburgh game, except it ended up in a win. I mean, the numbers are pretty close. It was kind of similar where the Ducks didn't really run away with the possession or the shot attempts. It was a little more lopsided in the Blue Jackets' favor, but the Ducks did win the scoring chance battle. They were outchanced from high danger areas, but it was still one of those games that wasn't really pretty, and they just managed to pull out a win. And we'll get into this later, but a lot of this, in my opinion, was on the back of Ryan Miller just continuing to be one of the best backup goalies in the league.
Yeah, it's kind of funny before we get into the game fully, but just overall thoughts. I thought the Ducks played better last night than they did tonight at 5-on-5, taking out all the penalties and all that different type of stuff. I think that if you look at the two games, the Ducks probably should have won last night's game and probably should have lost tonight's game. And so it's funny how sometimes it works out like that, but I mean, the Ducks left the two games 1-1, which is probably the right result for how the games went.
Well, a couple of reasons that you can look at why the underlying numbers, why the overall performance wasn't quite as good. There's two ways to look at it, and they're not mutually exclusive. One is that the Ducks did play last night, and it is a back-to-back, and you're going to kind of expect a little bit of a dip in performance, or at least if there is a dip, we're going to be more likely to attribute it to the fact that they played last night, and I think that that's a perfectly reasonable assessment to make. Another thing that we have to note is that this was actually a much different-looking Ducks team from last night. A couple of different lineup changes that certainly, well, we don't know yet because it's only been one game, but I certainly had an impact on just the way that this game went. First and foremost, as we predicted last night, as we famously bet on, even though we didn't really bet, was that Max Comtois made his season debut. And coming in, we also predicted who he'd come in for, Max Jones. Max Jones, after kind of a lackluster performance in Pittsburgh, he was scratched in favor of Comtois. But we also saw more reshuffling, partly on the blue line due to an injury to Brendan Gooley, which I was duly reminded of on Twitter after initially jumping to conclusions, even though I added the caveat in there. Hey, maybe he's hurt. I just thought it was strange that he'd be scratched. We saw Michael Dalzotto come in for an injured Brendan Gooley, and he was on the left of Cam Fowler, and that's been a pairing in all four of the Ducks games, Gooley and Fowler, so that's a bit of an adjustment. But up front, you saw more reshuffling. Devin Shore moving to center. You don't often see guys switching between center and wing throughout the season, and he does have that flexibility. So you saw Richie, Shore, and Terry, and then you saw Nick Delorier come into the lineup on the fourth line. and I believe Derek Grant moving to center, whereas I think Rowney has taken
No,
some of the faceoffs this season.
Grant's been playing center the whole time.
And then Ricard Raquel and Jakob Silverberg remaining together, but with Adam Henrique in the middle of that line. So what's interesting to me about that is that there was certainly no reason for Isaac Lundestrom to really come out of the lineup. I don't really buy the whole load management thing. I think that they kind of realized that Adam Henrique has been playing pretty well, and he kind of has to figure in more than maybe just a third line role. And I like the look for the Ducks of this top six, if we're just going to limit it to the top six, more than I did. I think that they kind of spread out top nine that they were bringing out the last couple of games, because you could argue it wasn't working. And so what did you make of the lineup changes?
Well, I mean, this kind of goes to what we had talked about yesterday and what we just agreed upon, but I'm good with the lineup changes because things weren't clicking. I mean, they only got one goal against Pittsburgh. They didn't really they generated more chances than Pittsburgh did, but I don't think they really generated enough of them. And so I'm good with the changes. And like you said, I think Henrique's been playing pretty good hockey, and so that makes sense. Putting Kasha with Getzlaf also makes sense because I think what you get into with Terry with Getzlaf is that you kind of get into a situation where both guys are looking to make the play, and I know some people have said that, and I think that's fine, but you need a very specific person on that left wing, and so I think Comtois and Kasha kind of mesh with Getzlaf's game a little bit more, and as we get into some of the numbers, it was a pretty good night for those guys. And the weird one is Lundestrom, and maybe part of it, I mean, there were some rumblings today that Sam Steele might be activated off IR. That does not look like it's actually the case as of right now, seeing as he was not listed as a scratch and Lundestrom was. If that would have been the case, Lundestrom would have had to have been sent down, and Steele would have had to have been listed as a scratch. So Sam Steele is technically still on the injured reserve list. Isaac Lundestrom is still with the team. But maybe it's a situation where they don't think he's ready. Maybe it's a situation where they want to have a more experienced type of player between Troy Terry and Nick Ritchie as compared to Lundestrom. Maybe it's a situation where Isaac Lundestrom, like we talked about last night, they put him in a situation where really he doesn't have to do a whole lot simply because Silverberg and Raquel are so good together. So maybe they wanted to try someone else out there and they didn't feel comfortable and didn't think that they would be putting Lundestrom in a position to succeed outside of Silverberg and Raquel. And so that actually probably, as I'm talking it through, would make the most sense here, trying to limit his minutes a little bit. So, and I think the most impactful change is probably Michael Del Zotto coming in for Brendan Gooley, because as much as I think Del Zotto had a decent game tonight, that pairing really suffered because Brendan Gooley was out.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to be expected. Michael Del Zotto hasn't really been more than a third pairing guy in a long time. And so getting put next to Cam Fowler, who, even though his minutes are being managed, I think, a little more carefully this season, is still going to get a lot more of a tougher matchups than Michael Del Zotto would typically get. One other theory that I have in regards to the Isaac Lundestrom being scratched file here is that I think this is maybe just also a bit of a vote of confidence in Devin Shore, who has played well, and putting him at third line center kind of solidifies that he is really the main piece, or kind of a mainstay in that middle six. And if he can kind of establish, I don't want to say that is his line, but really just be a mainstay on that line and be consistent in his performances, that's a really big get for Dallas Eakins, because I think they have struggled a little bit to find some consistency with the centers. And part of that has been Sam Steele's absence. We still don't really even know how Sam Steele is going to perform when he does come back, or how he would have performed otherwise. So I think just having Getzlaf, the center position, I think for coaches is so much about trust. And having guys that you can put out there and just trust the result, trust what you're going to get out there is important. And so just to recap a little bit, we talked about last night, I'm fine with changing lines game to game, but in game, what we talked about is more of an issue with. So let's get into the recap here. There's really not a whole lot to talk about in the first period. It was a bit of a rough first period for Anaheim, which again is what you would expect with the kind of performance that they had yesterday that was back and forth, and also being on a back-to-back. All of the caveats, they got outchanced 3-1 from high danger areas. outshot attempted. Nick Ritchie took a pretty bad holding penalty.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm forgetting the player right now who he was holding, but just had his arm around him going into the corner. It looks like they were, locked in arms, just prancing down the road or something like that. I just couldn't really figure out what the goal was there. But then moving on to the second period, which is really where we saw the bulk of the action. First goal of the night for Anaheim. This would come shorthanded and just kind of a fortunate bounce. The puck gets turned over again on the penalty kill, hits the linesman's skate at center ice, and just kind of lays it perfectly for Rickard Rakell. And all of a sudden, a cleared puck actually turns into a 2-on-1. Rakell goes for the shot, tries to kind of fake out Korpisalo before actually getting it off. Rebound gets left out front for Jakob Silfverberg, who's able to just bang it home. And again, this is something that we've been talking about for, it seems, every game of the season. But Silfverberg and Rakell are really a nice duo, and I think there's a bunch of reasons for that. But what's kind of your continued view now on those two together?
I think my continued view is that they both have a good understanding of one another's game. They're both guys that it's not a normal thing for guys from the wing to be able to drive play. That's more of kind of a center position type of thing, just simply because centers will have the puck on their stick. They're usually the playmaker. They're driving the play the other direction, and wingers are usually there and can get off shots, get in the corner, do the dirty work. But for Rakell and Silfverberg, they are the guys that are carrying the puck up the ice. They are working with each other, and they're able to drive the puck the other way. And then you add in the fact that they're both really good in their own zone, and so they're able to pitch in, jump down, help out the defense, help out the center a bit, also be safe on their points, and they're able to basically provide a good outlet. That is something that's very important. I mean, we harp on a lot the defensive system to break out the puck. We harp on the defenseman to be able to make a tape-to-take pass. But that's also there's also a big onus on the wingers there to get themselves into a position to accept that pass, to find some open space, and to be able to enter or receive a pass in the neutral zone, and then take that into the offensive zone and carry it in. And that's one of the things I think Silfverberg and Rakell do so well together is they both get open, they're able to interchange, they're able to make passes in the neutral zone and be able to enter the zone with speed. And now, granted, this penalty or shorthanded goal isn't exactly a great example of that, simply because it was a weird bounce that they're able to come in, but they both seem to just always make the right play. And I think that the other thing that is going well for them is Silfverberg's not afraid to shoot the puck from anywhere. Neither is Rakell. Rakell also can get his own shot. And so they're both players that basically, because Silfverberg takes so many shots, they both can get their own shot. They're not relying upon their center or their other winger to help them get shots. But they're also creative enough to be able to know when to make those passes to be able to allow the other winger to take the shot. And so it really is a great spot for a center to be. They're just able to be there and provide puck support. And they don't really have to do a whole lot. And so that's where I was curious to see how Adam Henrique would do in that situation, because he's a guy that is able to kind of poach goals. I mean, that's what we've seen from Adam Henrique during his time with the Ducks, is he's not necessarily a guy that a guy that's going to drive play, a guy that I know people want to claim that he's great in his own zone, but he's not amazing in his own zone. But he's good at poaching goals, and he's good at getting himself into good positions to receive passes in the offensive zone. And I think with these two, that's kind of important because they can find him. They can also get their own shot. And so there's a lot going there. There's a lot to unpack there a little bit, but I think that both of them are just having a great start to the season. And this is a combination that we saw a little bit last year, and it's something that I think that the Ducks will keep together moving forward, and it might become, I mean, I don't think the Ducks will ever name a specific line, the first line, the second line, the third line with this group, because it seems like it's more of an all-hands-on-deck type situation. But that line is almost becoming the de facto first line in terms of chances, in terms of goals, in terms of all of those different things. And I think that that's a sign of how good they've been.
Absolutely. And we put so much, like you said earlier, we place so much emphasis on, centers and defensemen that we kind of lose sight of the fact that wingers do have an important job. That a lot of the pressure gets released to wingers on the breakout. Everything tries to go through the middle or through the outside and then gets redirected towards the wingers. And they have to make split-second decisions, and they have to hustle up the ice and find a guy. Wingers have like any guy on the ice, but I think they just don't get enough credit how little time they actually have to make decisions in the transition game. And with Silverberg and Raquel, I don't think it's that surprising that they work so well together, because Silverberg has always been one of those guys who does seem to drive play a little bit from the wing. If you think back to the Cogliano, Kessler, Silverberg line, it always seemed, just looking at the numbers, that Silverberg was more of the driver on that line, and maybe Cogliano to a degree, but it was clearly more of the wingers doing the heavy lifting there. And he's probably not just due to age-related decline, and I'm not saying he's really declining, but you don't tend to improve at the stage he's at in his career. You're just kind of holding still in your peak. He's probably not that anymore, but he's still a really serviceable 5-on-5 guy. And next to a guy like Rickard Rakell, who likes to fly around the zone a lot, likes to make plays in the neutral zone. I mean, you're seeing Rakell now game in and game out, getting back to that where he's skating up the neutral zone with confidence, making moves that are pretty risky.
Yeah.
And I think being with a guy like Silverberg on your line is perfect for that, because he's a guy who can kind of cover that up a little bit. If there is a turnover, or even not even just like a game-breaking turnover, but just a slight turnover, he's following the puck closely. And those two just work really well together. And, of course, you can get into the whole Swedish connection thing. But it's a line that has worked. Yeah. And I am very curious to see what happens when Sam Steele comes back, how that line will perform, because one thing that's really holding those two back, like you were trying to get at with whether or not they are the Ducks' first line, is that they don't really have a consistent center. They don't have that big center to really – we always identify the line with the center. It's always Getzlaf's line or Henrique's line, and they don't really have that. And in a way, they're kind of defying convention. But I do think for them to really be a true top line, they do need a reliable center, a guy who's not just going to be kind of shuffling in and game out.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder what's going to happen once Sam Steele comes back, if he's able to come back on Monday. Will they keep Adam Henrique there, or will they shift him to a different line? And I'm just curious, because I think we saw Sam Steele have some success there in the past, but Adam Henrique didn't look out of place with those two today, and they were pretty good on the night. I mean, they had a 55% Corsi for percentage together, so they drove play towards the other net with shot attempts. But actually, if you look at chances, I may take this back a little bit then after having said that, with Henrique working there. They only generated 0.11 expected goals.
You hadn't scrolled all the way to the right.
I had not scrolled all the way to the right yet. I was only looking at the shot attempts. So even though they did have a good amount of shot attempts, a lot of them were probably to the outside then, and they weren't able to get on the inside. And they also allowed a decent amount of chances against. They played the most minutes out of any line for the Ducks, and having done that, they also allowed the most expected goals against, while also generating the third most. So they were 3 out of 4 in terms of expected goals for. So not exactly
I think
great.
A lot of it's again, this is the trouble with single game stat lines, is that there's a lot of noise in there, and we've seen Silverberg and Rakell be pretty much the team's best line for the last 4 games. So we're starting to have a sample. So it's hard to say whether or not this is indication that Henrique is not fit for that line. Fair. I mean, I would argue that you don't really need a Henrique on that line, because you can use him elsewhere. I mean, that's a good line on paper, and if they ever need to fall back on that, when they need a goal or something, I think it makes sense to put those 3 together. But in the interest of roster balance, it might make more sense to, when Sam Steele comes back, put Steele there, and then maybe put Henrique where Devin Shore is, and then maybe have Devin Shore as the 4th line center and move either Derek Grant to the wing or to the press box. I don't know.
Yep.
Because since the Game 1 heroics, Derek Grant's numbers and at eye test level are just they're not pretty. Okay, let's blaze through this recap here. And I just realized that we skipped through our first break. So let's make a little time for that here. Catch you on the other side. Okay, back from our first break. Apologies for the later break. We got a little carried away there with our grandiose ideas about this roster. That's okay. That's what we're here for. Now let's close out the recap. So third period, 2 words really to describe it, in my opinion. Ryan Miller made some really important saves, notably a breakaway save where he got the poke check out, a really nice save on Bjorkstrand to come out and cut off the angle. And then later in the period, again, just continuing to make big saves. The Ducks in that third period, although we have been giving them credit for not turtling this season, I got to say that it's interesting because when you watch the game, you could tell Columbus was getting a lot of the chances. But then if you look at the numbers, the Ducks actually outshot attempted the Blue Jackets in the third period and also outchanced them significantly.
Yep.
So it's interesting to look at that. Now, the high danger chances were about even, and the expected goals were also close to even. So I think that the definition of scoring chance, I think for natural stat trick, is a little generous. Even so, even if let's say if you're barely above break even or just at break even, when you're leading in a third period, that's still a good thing because you expect the other team to really pour it on, and especially being the road team where you're not getting the ability to really dictate the matchups, this is still a good trend for Anaheim that we're seeing here.
Well, and it means that you're not sitting back, you're not allowing them to just break into the zone. And also think about it like this. Anytime you're able to get a shot attempt down in their zone, especially late in the game, and I've been trying to really rally against using possession as the term for this Ducks team because I don't think they're necessarily a possession team. They're a high event team. And basically shot attempts, people try to use Corsi for percentage to relate to possession. It's more of a proxy. It's not an exact thing on that, which is why I try not to use it. But if you think about it like this, if you're leading in a game and you have more shot attempts than the other team, that means that you're in the other team's zone to take those shot attempts. Mm-hmm. And that means that they're not in your zone. And that is a very good thing because anytime that it's as simple as that.
But it's true.
Yeah, and so that's why it's so funny is people try to look at advanced stats, look at shot attempts, look at Corsi 4 and different things like that and try to make them out as this hugely advanced stat, this very hard concept, but it's very simple. You want more shot attempts at the other team's net because that means you're not defending at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it really is quite that simple. And in a 20-minute span, that's kind of all you need. You just need to survive. Factor in Ryan Miller, and that's what you get. Now, it is interesting because we talk a lot about how Ryan Miller was key in tonight's game, and I do think that he was because even if you look, for example, at the fact that the Ducks were able to kind of hold off the Blue Jackets in the third period and not really get caved in, the Blue Jackets probably still should have had at least one more goal. If you just look at expected goals in all situations, they were at 2.07. I definitely think that Ryan Miller made the Ducks one goal better defensively tonight, just with his play in front of the net. And it is really remarkable, though. I mean, he also set a record tonight. I can't recall the record. Is it the number of wins?
It's
something
the
like
most
that?
number of wins. Most number of wins for an American-born goaltender.
Yeah, which is pretty incredible. We kind of forget. I think now at this point in his career, we kind of forget how great Ryan Miller was at his peak and with the Buffalo Sabres. And he kind of, in a way, I don't want to draw too much of a parallel here, but Ryan Miller was kind of what John Gibson is now, where Ryan Miller was on a team in Buffalo, which was very good. So that's not exactly a perfect comparison, but a team where, at least in my estimation, he wasn't maybe getting the proper respect or the proper kind of credit for some of the good seasons he had. And I think when people caught on later on, he wasn't really that elite level starting goaltender anymore, especially after that trade to St. Louis. But we'll have plenty of other opportunities to talk about it this season. But the way his career arc has gone, I think it's what you would rather see from these elite starters, where instead of kind of fizzling out or being forced into bad situations, they go out gracefully because they're put in a situation that's really conducive to their bodies performing at that high level. I mean, you look at the last few seasons, and Ryan Miller hasn't had to start a ton of games. And going back to his first season with the Ducks, he's played 28 games. Started 21 games, and then last season started 17. So assuming he had been healthy, he would have started a little more. But that's such a good niche, and it's almost like having a great relief pitcher or a great closer where he's not a guy who can be a starting pitcher, but he's a guy who, when you need him to be good, he can actually deliver. And I think right now, the way the Ducks deploy Ryan Miller is probably one of the best in the league and a great example of how you can both maximize your backup and your starter at the same time. That's my long spiel on Ryan Miller.
Yep. Have we talked about the second Ducks goal yet?
Oh, sorry. Did I forget that?
Yeah.
I think I may have. My apologies. Well, I kind of skipped ahead, so sorry about that. But yeah, let's talk about Cam Fowler's goal here to put the Ducks up 2-0. And of course, we've seen it a couple times now this season. Andre Kasha bringing it down the neutral zone and finding Cam Fowler, who, like we've talked about, again, all season long, how the defensemen on this team seem more willing to join the rush. What's interesting about this play is that Andre Kasha had a very wide open Ryan Getzlaff on the other side of the ice, made the safer play, made a drop pass down to Cam Fowler, who then just shoots it on net, joining that rush. Probably a goal that Jonas Korpisalo would like back, I'm assuming. But either way, it was a nice goal, a nice execution from the Ducks. And also you like the process there, just given that, as we've talked about this season, defenseman jumping up in the play. Now, going to the Blue Jackets goal, Pierre-Luc Dubois, talking about goals that the goaltender would probably want back. I think this certainly applies to Ryan Miller here. Although he was very good on the night, this is not a goal that he'll probably look back fondly on. Josh Manson kind of getting beat a little bit here by Pierre-Luc Dubois down the wing. I don't want to call it that because it was kind of a weird play with the bouncing puck, but Dubois just throws it on net. And you wouldn't expect a guy to score from that angle, but somehow just a funky play. It beats Miller. There was some talk about it being really hot in Columbus today and that affecting the ice conditions. There's a lot of talk about pucks bouncing, guys falling over, but this is probably just one that Miller would want back.
Yeah, this is one Miller's going to want back simply because he got caught a little bit. Basically, he was playing the pass, not the shot, and left a lot open on the short side. So it's one of those that he's definitely going to want back. But for how many saves he made in the game, allowing one goal that wasn't a great goal, you can't really complain.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's kind of zoom out here with some big picture thoughts. So obviously the season debut for Max Comtois tonight. He only played, let's see here. He only played 11 minutes and 25 seconds tonight. And let's see, registered one shot on net. So not really a memorable debut for him. What did you see out of Max Comtois tonight?
Yeah, I don't really think he had that great of an impact. He had a couple plays where he made some noticeable drives towards the net, getting some chances playing with Getzlaff and Kasha. I mean, you look at that line had a lot of great chances. They had, so if you look at it, they had 71.43% Corsi for percentage with 10 shot attempts going towards the other team's net, and they created the second most chances with a .28 expected goals. So, I mean, I just don't think the Ducks created a whole lot of chances, which is more of a sign of that being the second highest on the team at .28. Actually, interestingly enough, the line that created the most expected goals on the night was Richie Shore Terry with almost the least amount of minutes on the night at 751, and they created .31 on the night as compared to .28. Yeah, I think Comtois was fine. I mean, it wasn't anything noticeable. I don't think he did anything to take himself out of the lineup. He didn't make any dumb penalties. On the night, he had one shot on goal. He had, I'm just trying to look right now. Let me see, 0.1 expected goals for, 3 shot attempts, 2 scoring chances. So overall, a decent night. I think for the most part, he should probably stay in the lineup over Max Jones. I think he probably made a better impact, but I don't think he was that noticeable.
Yeah, no, and this is something that I've talked a lot about with Comtois, is that he's just not really a guy who's like a Max Jones, who's just visually always there, where you just see him hitting guys or getting to scrums, or he's just not really noticeable in that way. He kind of flies under the radar. But there were a couple plays where I thought that he did help, especially in transition, getting a puck up the ice. And so, I don't know. I mean, again, we haven't seen enough of him to really say much of anything in regards to him. Now, we are slowly approaching our second break, but we do have time for this. One thing that I want to talk about, which is starting to confuse me a little bit, why did Troy Terry only play 9 minutes and 54 seconds tonight?
This didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think he was on either of the power play units.
Oh, well, now you're really jumping ahead to what I'm thinking here.
Oh.
So Troy Terry, so I guess to kind of sum this all up, Ducks played a decent game, probably could have gone either way. Great goaltending makes sure that it goes their way. So that's a wrap on the recap. Zooming out, though, we're now 5 games in. I think we're starting to have a feel on at least what we're going to see from this Ducks team for the next month or so. This is a team that is not necessarily going to always dominate play that certain style where they're dominating the shot clock, the possession game, but they do play a really up and down game. And I think on most nights, especially when their best players are out there, they do seem to be driving play in the right direction. But a lot of these games have been really close, and they still haven't scored on the power play. And the power play has looked really bad sometimes. I mean,
today
there was
did
a
not
penalty.
Look good. Today did not look good at all.
Well, it didn't look good yesterday either for most of the game. And there was a power play for the Ducks in the third period. Again, an opportunity to extend the lead, a lot like yesterday. Well, not quite the same, but an opportunity to have a big moment in the game. And no Troy Terry out there again. Nick Ritchie was out there. It just didn't really make a whole lot of sense. And what's interesting is that I've said a few times now that I think Troy Terry should be on the first unit power play, that the unit that they have with him and Silverberg, as well as Henrique and Fowler. And then you have, I'm forgetting someone, Raquel in the left side, that should be the top unit. What's interesting is I've just kind of been saying that from the eye test level, but when you look at the numbers, this is where it gets interesting. So when you look at the power play numbers so far this season, the player with the highest on-ice expected goals for at 5v4 is Troy Terry. So when he's out there, the Ducks generate the highest quality of looks. He also has the highest high-danger scoring chances for per 60 at 5v4. So it's not just my eyes. It's also the numbers. I mean, and you look especially at high-danger chances. So I'm going to take it a step further here. So the first 4 guys in high-danger scoring chances per 60 at 5v4. Troy Terry, Silverberg, Raquel, Henrique. So it's not just that they look good. The numbers also seem to back that up. And it's the same thing when you look at expected goals for per 60. So clearly that number looks better, and it also just seems to be producing better. So and again, it's so early that so many things could change, and they're just feeling things out. But I would be ready to abandon the Getzlaf, Kasha, Ritchie, Shore experiment, because that just there's such a the Ducks are almost twice as good in the stats that I've talked about as opposed to that other unit. So it seems like a pretty cut and dry decision. I don't know.
Yeah, and the confusing thing tonight from the decision with the power play units was Michael Del Zotto was on the second unit over Troy Terry. And that's the one where I look at it and I'm just like, huh.
Gotta have a defenseman.
Well, no, they had 2 defensemen. They had Del Zotto and Lindholm.
That's right.
That was puzzling. That one
I don't really understand it. Yeah. Well, also because Terry's minutes at 5-on-5 haven't been that high, but his overall minutes have been kind of padded by the power play.
Yeah.
And to not even get one opportunity tonight, I'm just wondering if there's just something we don't know at this point, because I feel like I'm just not watching the same game as this coaching staff if Troy Terry is not even playing on the power play at all. And yesterday, he didn't really play on it either when it really mattered. And so I understand that they want to have Getzlaf out there, and they think that the guys they're putting around him right now seem to work better with him. But A, that just doesn't seem to be true watching the games. And B, it clearly doesn't seem to be true when looking at the numbers. And small samples, caveats aside, I'm ready to go there and saying that should be their first unit.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that was noticeable in this game, and now granted this is one impactful play, and so I'm making a bit of a cardinal sin here, letting one impactful play kind of skew my judgment, but I think it goes in line with a lot of what we've seen, a lot of what the numbers kind of back up. But when Troy Terry gets going in the neutral zone, I'm not sure there's another player on the Ducks that's like him. The way that he's able to enter the zone and get around guys. He had that one play in the third period where he was able to get around the Blue Jackets defenseman and drive towards the front of net, finds Nick Ritchie, and sets up what was probably one of the best chances at 5-on-5 that the Ducks had, probably outside of the Fowler goal, where he was able to set up Nick Ritchie in front of the net. And then he also had another chance to score. So I'm just not quite sure why the minutes were so low. Maybe he's the odd man out is what they're seeing. I'm not quite sure.
That doesn't make sense. That just doesn't make sense. No. There's not really an argument right now.
No.
And again, I'm not saying put him on the first unit for the rest of the season. It's a done deal. I'm saying for right now, that just seems to be the better course of action.
Yeah.
And the only other guy,
well,
he's clearly number 2, but Ricard Raquel is definitely number 1 in the regard of guys who can fly up the ice, make plays. Terry's behind him in that regard, but he's really the only other guy that can do that outside of maybe Andre Kasha on the wings. And Kasha is more of a dump and chase guy. And so, yeah, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to not – and again, they only had one power play tonight, so that maybe that's part of it. But again, this is what I talked about yesterday. When you go on the power play, it's not time to massage minutes. It's not time to play the egalitarian game. You got to get the guys out there who are going to score, who are going to get you what you need in those 2 minutes. And I don't understand how Michael Delzato is factored into all of that.
I mean, the only thing that I can really think of that would logically make make a little bit of sense in this situation is that was late in the third period, or not late, but with under 10 minutes remaining, I think, in the third period. Maybe it's a situation where Terry's a newer guy to the NHL playing on a back-to-back night. Maybe fatigue played a factor, and so they figured getting out 2 defensemen. And also, didn't they allow a 4-on-1 rush on the first leg of that power play? And so maybe it's a situation where they wanted to get 2 defensemen out there with a 1-goal lead.
Again.
No, I know. I know where you're going.
I know what you're doing right now. I get it, but none of those things are truly logical. Like the thing about Terry's not as experienced. Where is that showing up negatively in his power play performance? Nowhere. He's doing better than the more experienced guys. So
I'm not disagreeing. I
know, but I'm just responding to that thought.
Fair.
That thought that's why he's being held out, and that could very well be the reason. Dallas Eakins seems to be a guy who really values this kind of intangibles. I don't know. Just he's an intangibles guy, and maybe that's part of it. I don't know. And of course, it's a long season. There are reasons for every decision that we're just not privy to. But just from the outside looking in, it seems very questionable right now to not have Troy Terry on the power play consistently.
Yeah, and really quickly before we hit our second break, I did want to make mention of the stats from this game just so people kind of have somewhat of an understanding of why earlier on we were saying this was kind of an ugly win for the Ducks. Shot attempts were 42-4, 49 against. Scoring chances were 21-4, 18 against. High danger chances were 4-4, 8 against. Expected goals, these are all at 5-on-5, by the way. 1.064, 1.74 against. So basically the Ducks allowed more shot attempts against, more high danger chances against, more expected goals against. Somehow found a way to get a win, which is why we were saying it wasn't exactly a pretty win. It was pretty ugly. It's one where they had to rely upon Ryan Miller to help them out and help them steal a little bit. But I think there are positive signs. I do think they played better last night, though.
On that note, let's jump into our second break. Okay, back from the second break here. So I think we've given our thoughts here on the game, big picture stuff. Any lingering thoughts on tonight's action? Nick Ritchie took a penalty.
Yeah, Nick, but he only took one.
He only took one.
Hashtag Nick Ritchie's all right. We still going with that. What did you think of Josh Manson's game? Because he's become a bit of someone that people have wanted to talk about. So what did you think of him?
Well, let's see here. I thought that overall he was fine. He's a guy that we harped on a lot yesterday because of I thought he had a not so good game. But looking at some of the numbers here, he did just fine. Him and Lindholm were kind of their usual steady selves. Expected goals, the quality wasn't that good. But if you look at some of the other just kind of counting stats in terms of scoring chances and shot attempts, they were fine. Again, though, he was part of that play that Dubois scored on. And although I'm not going to blame Josh Manson on that puck going in, Josh Manson was kind of caught out of position again on a zone entry.
I don't know about that.
No, but listen to what I'm
okay.
Let me finish my statement. Yeah.
Sorry.
Like what I'm saying is that this is now kind of a theme with him. The same thing happened yesterday against Crosby. Not the exact same scenario, but his timing at the blue line just seems slightly off. And again, it was a weird play, bouncing puck, but he's a guy who there's been a lot of talk There's been some chatter since we had this talk yesterday on Twitter today. And I want to take the opportunity to say that I don't think Josh Manson is like a bad player or anything like that. I do think, though, that in recent years there has been, I think we're conflating a little bit the success that Manson and Lindholm have had together and their individual abilities. And I do think that if you just look at the numbers year over year since 2015, so this is going back a while now, consistently Lindholm does better when the two are split up. Lindholm does better on his own or with other people than Manson does, just consistently.
Yeah.
And maybe there's an argument to be made that Manson gets worse partners when they're split up.
Yeah.
But this is now now seasons. This is now thousands of minutes of data. So I'm willing to trust that.
But I think it is worth mentioning that Lindholm's stats away from Manson aren't as good as they are with him.
Well, that's the thing. So, and that was my next point, is that Lindholm's stats without Manson are not as good, but they do remain closer to being good than Manson's do. Basically, when Lindholm is away from Manson, Lindholm has been close to break even or slightly above break even 5-on-5 defenseman, which is still good. That's still top 4, but Manson tends to plummet. He tends to be below that, and at times to a pretty drastic level. And so, again, I'm not saying that's proof that Manson is not that good or that he's just solely the beneficiary of playing with Hampus Lindholm. Because if you, like you said, when they're both apart, they're both worse. And the most important thing is that when they are together, which is pretty much all of the time, they've been one of the best shot suppressing pairings in the NHL. And so you kind of have to almost cast aside the who's better than who debate. I mean, I think it's an interesting thing to get into, and I think it is an interesting conversation to have when you're talking about value, because bear in mind, the Ducks did go out of their way to protect Josh Manson in the expansion draft.
Yep.
You could even argue it cost him Shea Theodore, and Shea Theodore's on the precipice.
It did.
And Shea Theodore is on the precipice of being one of the best defensemen in the NHL. And so that's a tough pill to swallow. Yeah. But is the actual cost worth the benefit? Because the benefit is that when Manson is with Lindholm, that's one of the best pairings in the NHL. So is that worth it? I think that there's definitely an argument to be made that that's worth it. And at the end of the day, if you're maximizing your best defenseman in Hampus Lindholm, getting the best possible results out of him, well then, yeah, I think that it's going a little too far to say, oh, Josh Manson, there's issues in his game. He's getting carried by Hampus Lindholm. I do think he's maybe held in a bit higher regard than he can really hold on his own. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter for the Ducks because they have a great pairing because of it.
Yeah, 100%. One thing
Your thoughts on this debate or this topic?
My thoughts on this topic are, I think Manson's really good. I think we've maybe seen his game come down a little bit in the last couple of years. I think, honestly, a big part of that is, and I've mentioned this a bunch on the show, I think, but Manson, when he's at his best, he has a very quiet game. He's able to make the 5-foot passes. There was one play tonight that really reminded me of it, where he got the puck below the goal line, had a guy coming at him on the forecheck. He kind of shielded the puck, turned away, saw Lindholm on the other side of the ice, and banked it off the boards, tape to tape to Lindholm. And that led to a clean breakout. And that is what Manson does so well, is make those passes work with Lindholm. When he gets in trouble is when he kind of overextends and almost feels like he needs to take the body and feels like it's his role in this team to be the physical presence. Yeah. And I think that's when he gets into trouble. And if he stays more quiet, worries about his position, and uses his stick more, I think he would have a whole lot more success. And I think what we're starting to see is him feeling like he needs to fill that role. There's no more Kevin Bieksa on this team for whatever reason. Yeah. Maybe they thought that Kevin Bieksa filled that role. There's no Stoner on this team if Manson thought that he filled that role. Beaujolais may have filled that role at one point in time also, but Manson's really the only person you can look at on this blue line and essentially think, oh, he's the biggest body. He's the big body on the defense, the guy that's going to throw the hits. And I think he's almost buying into that a little bit, and he needs to kind of try to take that out of his game almost, if that makes sense.
Well, I think that this might just be kind of a reality that now that we've seen so much more of him, because when he first came up with the Ducks, I remember writing about, hey, look out for this Josh Manson guy. He's going to be, he's playing really well.
Yeah.
The numbers all look great. And what I've noticed since that time, now that we've just had more time to look at him, is that I think where he struggles is in transition. Because if you look, all of his bad moments, and maybe this can be said for any defenseman, it's mostly when he's having to defend his blue line in open ice, as opposed to when the play is set, when it's just like a cycle down low. I think he's a really good in-zone defender where you rarely see him blow a coverage or leave a guy open. It's just not really something you see Josh Manson do, and that is a credit to him. But where you do see him get into a little bit of trouble is when guys are bringing it down. And like you said, he tries to make the hit, not necessarily because that's the most effective way to separate the guy from the puck in that moment, which is interesting. It's an interesting parallel because Hampus Lindholm is the total opposite. Hampus Lindholm is as close to perfect as a defenseman as you can be, but he doesn't really have those moments because he's never overextending himself. He's always putting in just enough to where he's bothering and pressuring his man, but never taking himself out of position. And it's just something about the Swedish defenseman. I don't know, but if like you said, if Manson could just tone down that energy, save it for in the moments where he's more playing to his strengths, he could maybe get back to being a little more predictably good. But again, we're kind of splitting hairs because those two guys are still so good together that I don't want to make too much of this. But it is something worth mentioning.
Yep, and
especially on a night like tonight.
Yep, and going into some question, or before we get into some questions, what were your thoughts on Michael Del Zotto?
So for those who can't see, for those who don't have access to our Twitch stream, I was doing, how would you describe that emotion? It's the emoji for those emoji users out there where instead of a circle, it's just like a flat line, just no expression. That's kind of my thought on Michael Del Zotto is I just think that if he's not in a third pairing role, it's going to be a little rough for him. And I'm a little, I don't want to say disappointed, but I would have been curious, I think more curious to see Jacob Larson in that second pairing role next to Cam Fowler. Although, in a way, you can make the argument that Larson and Holzer have been okay together, and so you don't want to break that up. But it was a bit of an opportunity to give Larson just a longer look. Because, again, we got to remember here that although you want to win every game as Dallas Eakins, this is still a bit of a development season. And so would have been an opportunity to get a younger guy in a bigger role. Again, it's not the end of the world. But I'm not really seeing a whole lot from Michael Del Zotto. I think that his breakout game, which is one of the most important attributes a defenseman can have, if not the most important in today's NHL. I think it's definitely better than Holzer's maybe, but he's not as confident in his reads. I think that his passing is just not that crisp. Again, if he's your sixth defenseman, if he's in a third pairing role where he's not having to do a whole lot, that's fine. But when he's out there playing bigger minutes with Cam Fowler, I'm not as on board. Let's just put it that way. What did you think?
Yeah, I did not think he was that great in the elevated minutes. I at this point in time, he's a third pairing defenseman.
Well, the problem is that the team doesn't really seem to think that.
I think that they do. I mean, he's the sixth or seventh defenseman. They've been stating that is kind of what Del Zotto and Holzer are fighting for. There's internal competition there for the sixth defenseman spot. And the only reason why.
So here's the thing: why didn't they put Holzer with Fowler and put Fowler back to the left?
I think it's because that.
Is it just a matter of familiarity?
Yeah,
at this point,
100%. I think
they don't want to take Fowler. We're not putting you back to the left under any circumstance.
No. Oh, is that why you said familiarity? My point on the familiarity thing was Del Zotto and Fowler played together last year.
Yeah, well, what I'm also getting at is that Fowler is still, in theory, getting used to playing on his off wing, and joggling him around might not be best, just in terms of making sure that he's really getting used to that. I don't know.
Yep. All right. So question time. So for those of you that are watching the recorded version of this on YouTube, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube or didn't know, we are on YouTube. You can search for us at AC Pod if you want to like and subscribe to the channel, it really helps a lot. No, on YouTube, the subscribe button's down, Felix. Down there. Yeah, subscribe to the channel, like the video. If you hit that notification button and hit that bell, you get notified anytime our videos go up. But we also, and then if you're listening to the recorded version of this on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, any of those platforms, we do a live stream of this show each and every time at twitch.tv/acpod. And at Twitch, you can support the show in a way that's completely free to you. If you have Amazon Prime, you have Twitch Prime. And with Twitch Prime, you have a way to support your favorite streamer out there every 30 days. And you do have to hit that subscribe button. Felix, point up. Felix, point up. The subscribe button up there every 30 days. And if you do that, you will get special emotes in the chat. People out there, all 3 new emotes are there. You get a special badge next to your name, depending on how long you've been a subscriber. And it really just helps out a lot. It really helps out the show more than you can imagine. So I did want to give a shout out to KFin19, who recently subscribed to the show. So thank you so much. And we will get into some questions. So,
okay, before we do the questions, sorry to cut you off, but I'm getting called out in the Twitch chat. And not really called out, but Stevie D, the ever-beloved Stevie D, is saying that I hate In-N-Out French fries.
You do.
And I'm not going to say that I remember necessarily what I said when we talked about this. I don't hate the French fries. I want to clarify my position, add context. I don't hate them, but they're not up there for me. Like, I'll still eat them. When I go to In-N-Out, I consume them.
You said they're bad.
I don't hate them.
You said they're bad.
They're bad, but I don't hate them. Like, here's the thing. Bad French fries are still French fries. I'll still eat them.
Wait, weren't you the one?
I'll still eat them.
Weren't you the one on that show?
I'm not just going to leave them there cold.
Weren't you the one on that show that said French fries are bad? That if 95% of them are bad?
That point. No. No, I was literally just repeating what someone else had said. Like, I don't understand why this is getting so just spun out of proportion. The spin game by the fake news media is just out of control here. That's fine. It's cool.
All right, let's get into some questions really quickly. I need to mention this.
I know the truth.
ScienceCat108 says, and the reason I'm reading this is very specific, and I'm wondering if you can guess who this is. Will Felix not do any drop passes this Sunday?
I don't think I did any drop passes last Sunday.
So this is Jessica from our Anaheim Calling Beer League team, and so we are playing this upcoming Sunday.
Well, she's just calling me out because I called her out on her penalties last week.
Wow.
Which, by the way, were good penalties because I believe that they prevented some breakaways.
They did. They prevented breakaways. Something coming.
I just realized I can hear the Disneyland fireworks from my window.
Good work.
So I'm closing my window.
Good work. All right, so we've got a couple of questions that we should get to on top of that. By the way, scored a goal in our first game on Sunday. We're not going to talk about the score.
I assisted on it.
We're not going to talk about the score. Bob Shockey asked a question of the new players. Who's going to be the number one breakout this season?
Ooh, number one breakout. Well, I'm not really confident that Troy Terry will break out because Dallas Eakins doesn't seem too interested in giving him the minutes. I'm going to say Devin Shore. Devin Shore breakout season because he's actually getting the opportunities and he's playing well.
That's not a new player. That does not count.
Okay, new player? Okay, well, I think it'll be Troy Terry just because he's the only young guy of the forwards, at least, who's going to get at least a consistent opportunity. Although you could argue that Brendan Gooley has already been that because I don't really think anyone expected him to be as good as he has so far. And I would expect that to continue. So I guess in a roundabout way, I'm just going to say Brendan Gooley will be the breakout guy.
Yeah, I'm going with Troy Terry. I gotta stick with my guy.
I think he's in the doghouse.
I think
he's in the doghouse. I don't know why. I think he's in the doghouse. All right.
Stevie D said, "Are the Ducks losing the image of the big bad Ducks with this new coach and utilization of young players?" I'll take this one real quick. Go for it. This is an interesting one because back when Bruce Boudreau was the coach, they weren't necessarily the big bad Ducks. I mean, if you look back on I think it was the year they lost to the Kings in the playoffs, so 2014. Their centers were they had Ryan Getzlaf, Bobby Ryan, Corey Perry, but they also had Saku Koivu. They had Matthew Perreault. They had Andrew Cogliano. They had all these guys. It's not. They had they would have had Sammy Vatanen on the back end. They would have had Ben Lovejoy. It's not as if that team was the big bad Ducks. and yet they still had that kind of reputation around the league. I think it's really going to take a couple years of a completely new system, completely new look, and maybe it's just a completely new face of the franchise to get rid of that moniker.
Yeah, it's basically when Ryan Getzlaf retires. Because he is really, at this point, he's really the last true link to that era.
Yeah.
Even if you look at Silverberg, Fowler, I don't think they represent that nearly as much as Getzlaf. I mean, Getzlaf was actually on the 07 Cup winning team. So once he retires, maybe that image will fade away. Also, the Ducks are not as big nationally, so I think that narratives tend to linger a little longer because people are just not paying as much attention, which is unfortunate, but that's probably part of it.
Bonnie asks, how much can a goalie do during the game? How far can he go out of his crease? How much playing is he allowed? There was some chatter online about Miller's stick play, so specifically a stick check. So just so everyone knows, to kind of add to this, or not add to this question, but try to answer one portion of it quickly. Goalies can only take the puck up to center ice. They cannot pass the red line at center ice. If they do, it will be, I believe, a delay of game penalty. There's a glorious video clip of Patrick Waugh doing this.
I'll throw it in the chat here.
Patrick Waugh doing this when he was on the Avalanche. I believe it was to the St. Louis Blues at the time.
And it was against Wayne Gretzky,
and he basically pulled off like a spin move. It was really cool.
I'm throwing this up.
So in terms of their impact on the game, goaltenders have the biggest impact on the game, and I don't think there's really any other way to put it.
They're the position that has the most impact. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so in terms of breaking the puck out, I think some of the best goalies in the league ever at moving the puck really add another element to their game by being essentially another defenseman to help the breakout. But if you don't have a good goalie, you really can't be good in this league. And it's that plain and simple. And there's no other position in hockey where if you have one guy on your team that's not great, your team's screwed. Goalie's really the only one. So it's the most important position in hockey. I don't know if you have anything to add, but we have another good question.
Agreed.
Ken Paffu asked, on the OC Registers article, Raquel had said that Aikens was all about being more offensive. They haven't scored more than 3 goals this season. Do you think he's happy about how offensive the team is being, or do you think there's still a lot more to do?
Well, what do you think about that?
So it is slightly concerning, seeing as the only game where we really saw an offensive burst was against the Sharks. And I think that was the only game where the offense really kind of looked like it was clicking, creating chances, a lot of those different things. I think part of it's still a feeling out process. I think it's still too early to really tell. We're only, 5 games in? 5 games into the season. And so it's a little bit too early to tell. I'm not sure how much of it. I mean, I can look actually very quickly while we're talking about this. I'm curious where the Ducks are in terms of expected goals on the season.
I have it for you.
Okay, where are they at in the league in terms of expected goals for per 60?
That's why I asked you to start while I could look it up. So if you look at the season, so just in terms of expected goals for just raw total, the Ducks are 6th in the league. Now they have played 5 games, which is more than a lot of teams. But if you look at expected goals for per 60 of all the teams that have played so far, let's see here.
They're 19th.
They are 19th. So that's not great. It's about where they were last year, if I'm recalling correctly.
They're at about 2 expected goals per game. So they're generating enough chances to basically equate to about 2 goals per game.
Yeah, and one thing that I should mention, though, is if you look at some of the scoring chance numbers, for example, they are in the top 10 when it comes to scoring chances for per 60. They are much lower when it comes to high danger chances. So they're getting some volume in certain areas, but in terms of getting to the truly dangerous areas of the ice, they're not quite there yet, which, I mean, I'm not ready to call that concerning. It's just, for some of this big picture team stuff, it's just too early, just way too early.
Yeah, 100%. We need to get a bit of a bigger sample size. By the way, the Carolina Hurricanes are really good.
Or is it just small sample?
Nope, the Hurricanes are very good. This builds upon the sample that we had last year.
So why? Oh, okay, there we go. Dang it.
Yeah,
you actually made a valid response. Well, they also beat the Islanders, who were not very good. So.
Yeah. We got another question. So I'm not too worried. I think I want to see a little bit more. I'd like to see them generate more. I think one of the things Tony actually Kampafu brought up earlier was it seemed like in the first period they really struggled with getting the puck through the neutral zone and breaking out, and that's one thing we've seen early on in games specifically with them struggling to get clean breakouts and getting through the neutral zone with speed. So that's one thing to really focus on, I think, what they're doing and maybe see if they can improve on that. Zeneze asked us, should we be worried about their slowish starts? So that's kind of a transition from what I just said, actually. Do you think that Ducks fans should be worried about the slow starts in games?
No, because it could be any period. What if you were bad in the second period or the third period? I think the Ducks had this issue in the second period a couple of years ago. I was like, why did things go wrong in the second? So I just think every team has a dip at some point in the game. Theirs happens to be the beginning of the game, but realistically, you're not going to get 3 perfect periods. So, and also, they're a bit of an up and down team. They're not a team that's been together for a long time, just in its current form. So you're going to see some peaks and valleys that you don't see from, let's say, teams like the Lightning or St. Louis or teams that have a bit more of an established core together.
Yep. So let's get 2 more questions because I want to talk about this one because, Tony, you made me mad. Is Troy Terry the new Aberg? No. No. Not
he
even
might
close.
be.
No.
9 minutes, like less than 10 minutes today? I don't know.
No, I'm not. I'm talking. I think what he's mentioning is someone that kind of will pop up with offensive skill, but doesn't really sustain it or actually do anything.
I mean, only 9 minutes. That's the proof is in the pudding. I don't think he's going to be that because Pontus Aberg was legitimately bad defensively, and it's just not going to happen because Pontus Aberg's just not as good of a player, at least, and especially at the point that Troy Terry's at, but also Troy Terry was drafted by the team, and you could objectively be as good or as bad as the other player, but if you were drafted by the team, you just get far more leeway. And so he's not going to end up like Pontus Aberg traded for a guy who is now on the San Diego Gulls second or third line. So it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and then we got this this question from KFin19 said, this is jumping the gun quite a bit, but if the Ducks keep winning and end up in a playoff or with a playoff run in their sights, do they make a big 1-year move to win now? Would they go after a UFA or a potential UFA at the deadline?
So we're talking about this year?
Yes.
Oh, man. I mean, I feel underprepared for this question because I don't actually know who the free agents are this year. And so I don't know if you want to look that up. If you want to give me some names, this could inform my decision. But I think that if the Ducks are in a position to make the playoffs at the deadline, we have seen Bob Murray in the past make moves if he believes that the team is worth kind of spending capital on. And so if the Ducks are in a position to make the playoffs, I could definitely see Bob Murray make a move to help them get in or get through. But I wouldn't really expect that just because the way that this team is currently structured, there's not really a lot, just internally, there's not a lot of deals to be made. There's not really a lot of guys to be shipped out. I don't really see them trading one of the younger players after just 1 year. Maybe you traded Daniel Sprong, but what value does he really have? It would take quite a bit of restructuring to get him to the point where he can have real trade value. So I don't know. I don't really see it, but maybe you're seeing something that I'm not here.
Yeah, I don't really.
I just don't think they have anything to trade. And I'm not saying that they're a bad team. I just think that the way their team is set up, there's not that classic guy who's on an expiring or a prospect. Maybe Sprong would be that guy, but I think that if you're trying to make an acquisition to help you, Sprong isn't really the guy you're going to trade.
Here's a name. Taylor Hall.
Oh no. Are we already starting this?
Hey,
what's the Devils' record?
They're not good. They're very not good.
Oh no. They're very not good. It's early.
It is very early.
It's very early. Well, I think
let's have some fun.
Our headline I think we just found our subject line for the podcast. So this is good. This should generate some clicks.
Let's
Taylor
have some
Hall
fun
to
here.
Anaheim? Question mark.
Give me some thoughts. So for those of you out there that don't know, the New Jersey Devils are currently 0-2-2. So, and Taylor Hall's an unrestricted free agent. They want to keep him, but he has said he wants to go to a team that's going to win at some point in time in the near future.
Well, okay. Let's assume a couple of things, because this exercise only really works if we have new information to work with.
That's true.
Let's assume that the Ducks have shown some signs of promise, that the team is moving forward. At that point, they're at least a player to even A, think about making a win now type move, and B, also a team that Taylor Hall would hypothetically consider. So those two conditions are satisfied. However, I don't see a scenario, and this is hypothetical, but I don't see a scenario where Taylor Hall goes over to a team and he isn't a rental. I think that he is very dead set on testing the market and being a UFA. He's really big on player empowerment. You see his comments about the NBA, that type of thing, where players have a little bit more agency. And so I think that the Ducks wouldn't really be willing to spend a whole lot to bring him over as a rental. You know, I'm sure that they would want to bring him over if he were willing to re-sign, but A, that would take a whole lot more.
Yeah.
And B, I just think whoever acquires him, if let's say the Devils flame out, and they also probably realize that he's not coming back, because that would also have to be a condition satisfied here. I think that most likely he would just he would be a rental. And at that point, are you willing to give meaningful assets up? Because even as a rental, Taylor Hall is going to cost you something. So what do you do with that?
Yeah.
It's interesting to me.
Yeah, no, it definitely isn't. I don't think that this is a move the Ducks should make, really. I mean, he makes them better.
Terry for Hall?
Well, hear me out here.
Terry and a first for Hall?
Hear me out here. Hall's going to want a whole lot of money. He has an MVP. He's a very, very good player. He is 28 years old, going to be 29. The Ducks probably shouldn't be giving out money to a guy like that necessarily.
But if you're going to give my counter to that, yeah, if you're going to give money to anyone who's on that side of the scale, he's probably one of the guys you can feel better about doing that with. I mean, he's one of the best players in the league. Has had difficulty staying healthy in recent years, which is definitely a concern as he ages. But at a per 60 level, he's one of the very best scorers in the league. Basically, whenever he's healthy, he's at least at a first-line level.
You know what? I'm looking at the list of unrestricted free agents next year. Granted, some of them could very well get re-signed. There's some interesting names here. Some very, very interesting names here.
So we're already talking about next first free agent class.
Hey.
Okay, give me some names.
Nicholas Backstrom.
Okay, well, to your point about aging curves and guys you wouldn't want to throw a whole lot of money at.
Agreed. I'm just throwing some names out here. These are unrestricted free agents.
Two things on Backstrom: age, and I actually don't really see him leaving Washington.
Yeah, I don't.
He retires at Capital.
Probably. But, might as well have a little fun here.
Jake just stirring that pot.
Why not?
Stirring that pot, making a stew.
Other names, Alex Pietrangelo, also 30 years old, so probably not. Here's the one that really popped out as me as interesting. Mikael Granlund.
That's interesting to you?
Yeah.
Mikael Granlund?
I think he would be an interesting fit.
How old is he? 24, 25?
He's 28.
28? Well, he definitely costs you a lot less, and he does add another playmaker to the lineup.
I mean, he has 3 points in 4 games so far this year and has been a good playmaker with Minnesota.
Start writing the contract. Start making the trade offer. Do it now. Get him while he's hot. No, I mean, my thing with going back to Pietrangelo, that's probably the most interesting thing you've said so far, or the most interesting name outside of Taylor Hall.
Oh, thanks.
Is that with Pietrangelo, I actually do wonder about the future of St. Louis's blue line, because they have a lot of righties. They have 4 righties. They have Pietrangelo, Falk, Parayko, and I'm probably forgetting another guy, but they have 3 legitimate right-handed guys, and I feel like that's not tenable. You can't minimize a Parayko or a Pietrangelo or a Falk into that kind of role. At least that's not what you would expect a team to do. So I feel like someone ends up getting moved in that situation. maybe Pietrangelo is the guy who gets kicked to the curb. I don't see it happening as their captain, leading them to a Stanley Cup, but maybe he is the guy that gets moved. Now, would you sign his next contract?
No.
He would fill a pretty glaring need for the Ducks, though. I mean, if there's any guy who would immediately come in, address a need, make the team better, probably still be good for another couple of years, it's going to be Alex Pietrangelo. So of all the names that you have provided so far, I think Pietrangelo might actually make the most sense, which sounds really weird.
But yeah, the issue there is the whole aging curve thing.
Yeah, but what are you going to do with Michael Granlund? You're just adding another guy, basically.
That's
another body.
Fair. I think out of the forwards, Taylor Hall would be the one that I'd be most intrigued by.
Taylor Hall is the most swing for the fences guy. He's the one that, if you can get him, is going to make the most impact and is going to be reasonably good for a number of years.
Let's play this out real quick.
Okay.
So we aren't necessarily saying that the Ducks are going to be in a space where they should even go after Taylor Hall. We're not saying that this is a move they should make. But let's just say, for instance, the Ducks are able to trade for Taylor Hall. And let's say they lose Troy Terry as the player off the roster. Or
then you're out. You're not in agreement anymore.
Or Max Jones or Max Comtois. You give up a prospect like that, another high-end prospect, and a first-round pick, something like that for Taylor Hall. You add Taylor Hall to this Ducks roster. Are they a cup contender?
No.
Okay. Then there's your answer.
I don't think that's a fair way to frame it, though, because there's not one player who's going to make you a cup contender. I think we can agree on that. Yeah. I don't think there's one guy.
There has to be a bunch of moves that would have to happen.
I think Taylor Hall, though, of all the guys, puts you considerably closer to that, to a higher degree than anyone else.
Yeah.
So he moves the needle the furthest down the road. Now, I think that with Taylor Hall, what's interesting is that he then really opens up the chessboard for their forwards. You're all of a sudden you're taking a lot of pressure off a guy like Rickard Rakell, even Ryan Getzlaf. All of a sudden, those guys are not as much the focal point of their offense, and that can rejuvenate Getzlaf, for example, a little bit. Maybe takes pressure off of Sam Steele. And at that point, also the thing that you have to kind of think about, and now we're just totally off kilter, which is fine, whatever. It's Friday. I don't care.
It is what
it is. The Pacific Division is trending in a very weird direction because if you look at the top, the San Jose Sharks are getting older.
Yep.
They're going to be a good team for another couple of years, but they're getting older. There's really not, outside of Timo Meier, they don't really have any one player who's, I would say, really on the kind of upswing of their career. Even a guy like Tomas Hertl is a little older than we realize. And then your favorite team, the Vegas Golden Knights, same deal. I mean, that's kind of a ticking time bomb, right? At some point, not that that's going to fall apart, but they're going to see a decline. All of their guys are either in their prime or kind of in their late prime to exiting it, right? You can agree there?
Yeah.
So getting a Taylor Hall kind of sets you up for the next 3 or 4 years, while the rest of the team presumably is improving. So maybe buying into a guy like Taylor Hall now would make sense for the Ducks, not so much for next season, but for when some of those other teams start to fall back a little bit.
And I think the thing that the Ducks can maybe do is maybe instead of giving him an 8-year deal, maybe they try to pad up the actual number per year.
Right.
Because the thing is, the Ducks, yes, they will have Corey Perry's additional cap hit next year, the added $6 million, but they do have the long-term injured reserve as an option. So it's definitely an interesting thing to think about. Granted, I was the one who threw this out, so I brought
We're going
this
all
upon
the way
myself.
down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
all the way down.
Yeah, he makes the team better. It would be a lot of fun, but this is a fun question to kind of speculate on real quick before we wrap this thing up. Ken Pafu said, "How good will Raquel Zegras Silverberg be?" End of the year, happening.
Oh God. You're really stuck on that. You're just basing all of this off of what happened last time with Troy Terry. What I would say here is that with Zegras, I still don't really know what to expect from him at the NHL level. I think it's probably still going to take a year or two for him.
He looked good last weekend, by the way, or 2 weekends ago.
Yeah, in college.
Hey.
Not the NHL.
Hey, still looked really good.
Yeah.
Good. Watch that game.
I mean, by the time that Trevor Zegras probably is going to be in the NHL and be a difference maker, kind of both of those things, Raquel and Silverberg are going to be what, 29, 30?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I just don't know.
Okay. All right. So, I think that's going to do it. You want to give one hot take for someone, whether it's on hockey or outside of hockey? Want to give us a hot take?
Well, one thing that I did see pop up in the Twitch chat is that someone mentioned Wendy's Frosties. They are very good. They are very good.
They're
and
right.
Wendy's as a whole is pretty underrated.
Square burgers, not very good though. Their chicken, elite.
Yeah, their chicken sandwich. I'm not saying it rivals Chick-fil-A because that would be going a little too far, but it's good. It is very good.
Who has the best milkshake in fast food?
I haven't tried all of them. The Habit has a really good milkshake.
I was about to say that's not fast food, but they do have drive-thrus. So
how is that not? How is that not fast food? It's burgers and fries. What the hell?
I stopped myself. If they don't have a drive-thru, then it's not fast food. It's that simple.
What?
It's that simple.
What?
It's that simple.
What?
By the way, Ken Pafu has probably the worst take I've ever seen. Chick-fil-A chicken sandwiches are not good.
I think they're overrated.
Yeah, they're still good.
They're overrated.
They're good.
I think that the spicy deluxe. If you don't go spicy deluxe,
I just go just regular spicy.
See, if you just go chicken with bread, it's not nearly as good.
Wow.
If you just go chicken, it's just like it's incomplete. I was talking to my buddy the other day, and he was saying, yeah, well, he gets his burger plain at In-N-Out. He just gets no lettuce or tomato. He gets the meat and bun.
Does he get sauce?
Yeah, he gets the spread.
Oh, okay. Then all right,
but
I get it.
No lettuce, tomato. Like, what kind of world is this? What world are we living in?
So
here?
wait, getting back to the thing, best fast food shake.
I mean, does the Frosty count as a shake?
Sure.
Then Frosty.
Jack in the Box.
Jack in the Box is just terrible.
Jack in the Box.
I mean, if they want to sponsor the show, then I'll sing their praises. But outside of that, I think it's by far
their tacos are delicious.
Unquestionably the worst fast food. It's not even close.
This podcast is now sponsored by fast food. I think we kind of are at this point.
I don't know why we've done this the last couple shows. It's weird.
You're the one that brought it upon yourself by bringing up that brought up fries.
Well, it's because people are bringing it up in the chat, and I'm trying to address that.
You started this 2 episodes ago. This is your fault.
Jack in the Box sucks. I just want to keep piling on to Jack in the Box.
Their tacos are delicious.
No,
their tacos are delicious.
Their tacos are not food. Their tacos are just some type of substance.
I don't care. They taste
good.
Some
food-like substance.
They taste good. That's all that matters. They taste good.
All right, let's get out of here.
This is a fun bit.
Let's get the hell out of here.
All right, so
we're done for the week. Can you tell us the last pod of the week?
Even though we're doing one this weekend.
Actually, no, we have another one.
We're doing the Patreon this week. We're doing the Patreon this weekend. So,
speaking of which, if you're not tired of us yet, after 3 podcasts this week, then I highly recommend that you check out our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/acpod. So again, if you're not getting enough of us through the regular content, well, for $1 a month, you get access to our Discord chat, and that will be where you can interact with us when there's breaking news, when we just get into random debates, whatever the case may be. You get access to that. I think it's a cool little feature. I mean, for $1 a month, it's more than you get for, I don't know, $5 at other places in whatever field. Now, for $5 a month, though, with our Patreon page, you get 2 bonus episodes a month. And if you enjoy the bits, if you enjoy the kind of off-script stuff, or if you just want to hear more hockey talk, because believe it or not, we actually talk quite a bit about the league as a whole on that pod, then I highly recommend it. It's 2 extra episodes a month, and that's just for $5, and you also still get access to the Discord chat. And if you're a patron, you also get to jump in and suggest topics. We solicit the patrons quite a bit in terms of content matter. And so I think for all those reasons, if you enjoy the show, you want more, and you just want to show your support, hey, for $5 a month, it is well worth it. But we are trying to make it even more worth it for you. So, Jake, tell the listeners how they can do that.
So, if you have thought about becoming a patron and you've really been on the fence about it, use this month as your only month to do it. And if you like it, stay. If you don't, you can back out. But this month, we're treating this as our drive month. So we have a couple different goals that if we hit later on, we'll still do them. But if we do it this month, there's extra incentives. So if we hit the $350 a month, all of our Patreons or all of our patrons during the month of October, so even if you jump on and then jump off, we will host a watch party exclusively for you guys. And pictures of beers will be on us. And so that's if we hit 350. We're at 292 right now, so we're climbing our way up to that one. And then we have a couple other ones that are also big at $500 a month. We're going to add an extra, we will host a live Patreon exclusive show is what we'll do at $500 a month. At $750, we're going to add another bonus episode. So instead of just getting 2 extra episodes a month, you're going to get 3 for the same $5 a month if we hit $750. At $1,000, we're going to host a watch party, and we'll have a live post-game show afterwards. And then at $1,500, we're going to add yet another bonus episode. So we're going to get up to 4 bonus episodes a month. And so if we hit that $1,500, even if you're at a $5 tier, you're going to get 4 bonus episodes. You're doubling the amount. So there's real incentive there to help us really make this thing greater, really help this out. And basically by doing this, we're growing the show. We're making it better. We're going to add more elements. I have something coming in this weekend that hopefully will help out the stream and make it look even better. And part of that is from the Patreon. So if you've ever wanted to support the show in a financial way, that's the best way to go about it. It really helps out a lot. So once again, patreon.com/acpod. Also, other ways to help support the show is, like we mentioned here, twitch.tv/acpod. You can watch us live, become a subscriber in a way it's free to you if you have Amazon Prime. Another way to go about it is find us on YouTube, leave a comment there on the video, like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us get more notoriety, get more views, and all of that good stuff. And the other way that's completely free to you is leave an Apple Podcast review. If you really enjoy the show, let your voice be heard. We'll read your review on the show. And leaving those Apple Podcast review really does help out a lot. It helps get us more notoriety on Apple. It pushes us up if people search hockey, if people search Anaheim Ducks. It really helps get us higher up in the search rankings and helps the show grow. Essentially, all of the things that we want some support on are helping us make this thing better. So the latest review that we got is from Joe O. Says, fantastic info on the Ducks, 5-star. Says, love what you guys are doing. Really appreciate the work you put into this. So thank you so much for that review. We put a lot of work into this, and so it's nice to hear good things about it. And Stevie D says, leave a rap review, and they will rap the review live. So, yes, if you want to tell us to sing it, well, you're going to deal with one of us singing it or rapping it or reading it in a haiku. We've had some people do some fun and creative things with Stevie D probably being up there for one of the more creative ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of echo what Jake was talking about with the Patreon, we're setting these goals, and they may sound a little lofty, but there's actually legwork that's already being put into making them potentially happen. So we're not just putting these out there to see if they happen. We're not, we're not expecting them to happen, but we're operating as if they are. And that's what you're getting with this deal. It's not just like we're doing it just to throw a line out there and see what happens. But like Jake said, if you don't want to support us financially, that's absolutely fine. I get it. Money's tight. Rent is high. Gas ain't cheap. It's California. If you're not in California, well, oil prices are going up across the world. So there you go. But yeah, so like Jake said, the free way to you is just through that Apple review. So definitely check that out. Now, of course, if you're not an Apple user, well, there's still other ways that you can check out the show and support it. And you can listen through Spotify. You can also listen through Stitcher. Check us out on social media. Jake is on Twitter at ReindeerGames91. Expect his weekly rankings to be out soon.
Next week.
He is working on them diligently. So they will be out soon. Definitely expect that. Make sure to bug him about it on Twitter.
Yeah. By the way, the other thing on the reviews I want to mention, if you've left a review on a different country's website, please let me know. I'll find it. I've been searching.
We have a way of seeing it now that I will share with you after.
So I'll be able to go back and find that if you did that.
I'm also on Twitter at Felix_Sicard. That is where I get corrected by Ducks beat writers when I tweet in the correct stuff. That's fine. That's cool. I'm not
Called
mad at
out.
all. Not
Called
offended at
out.
all.
Called out.
Called out by Elliot T. Now, I tweeted something prematurely and was immediately proven wrong. It's cool. No worries. And of course, make sure to check out AnaheimCalling.com. That's the home base. That's where we push out all the content, where there's great articles being written by our numerous writers. So make sure to check that out. And that's, of course, at Anaheim Calling on Twitter. That is going to do it for us tonight, guys, for this Friday night edition. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is our first full week back on the beat after a summer off, a long summer of rest. But we are not going to be resting for very long. Like we talked about the bonus pod, we are going to be recording a bonus episode on Sunday. And we will be back on Monday, I believe, to discuss the post-game show for the matchup against the Boston Bruins. That will do it for us tonight, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you at the next show.
Bye.